with Diana and Aage.
One.
Hello, hello. This is Aage here in the southwest of the United States. I am a host of the Universal Consciousness Show, and I have with me my co-host Diana over in Germany. Are you there with us, Diana?
Yes, hello everybody.
Hi, hi. We're set. Tonight we are going to blow your mind away. Well, we believe you a little bit because our guest tonight is a scientist, an electrical engineer. He is an inventor of several inventions and processes of interacting with the mind in the biofeedback and life force measurement arena. He is also dealt with biological architecture and several others. He's an author of several books. He's a sought-after lecturer globally on the Fractal Universe, the science behind and how the universe works, sacred geometry, how the unified field interacts with the physical life we think we are living, and how to use this knowledge to make our everyday better. He has created over 50 videos on science and our interaction with a self-aware unified field. He has founded and directed several projects and learning centers, and mentioned a few of them is Crystal Hill Farm. That's a collective bioharmony experiment, and also hosted many conferences like the Ancient Wisdom Conference and the Fifth Way Mystery School. And I remember somebody telling me somewhere not long ago that he had a Kundalini experience, where the composition and the explanation of the universe was downloaded into his mind, and this is an incredible experience. So, I'll have to quit talking here because otherwise I'll be talking for the next 20 minutes about his bio. So I want to welcome to the show Dan Winter. Are you with us, Dan?
Hi, nice to be here, and you're too kind. You're really too kind. Some of that information is a bit old, but yeah, we've been around the world many times, and we teach the physics of consciousness, physics of feng shui, and now we have many technologies that prove the principle. So happy to be here and happy to share. Thank you.
Yeah, I tell you, there's more than I in this house that is an admirer of your work for the last, I think probably you have probably accumulated somewhere around 400 to 450 years worth of experience and squeezed it into about 50. Is that about right?
Well, that's pretty subjective. But, when you speak of the number of videos, actually, if you do a search on YouTube on Dan Winter, there's something like 200,000 of my videos on YouTube, and thousands of them are originals, actually.
Holy moly.
The most published teacher on the planet in that regard.
Oh man, you got to promise me something. That is that you will live forever, because we need more.
Well, trying to be a shareable wave,
Yeah, okay. I tell you have done so much, and there's so much to talk about here. I really have no idea where to start, but maybe you could mention something about what people really need to be concentrating on and thinking about and keeping in their mind, because of especially what the mind is these days when it's so strange out there.
Well, it's the right question. There are so many different versions of spirituality and religious history, and really the noble side of all those traditions are provable with science now. We understand exactly what it is, for example, that goes through death, and we've measured it. The near-death experience is an electrical black hole, and surgeons, Ray Moody's friends, have proven that it's electrically contagious, and we know why, and we know where you go, when you go, and why you go. And basically, it amounts to getting an aura, a charge field, a cold plasma aura, your car, your boat to the underworld, which is coherent enough to propagate, which is the physics of the burial ground design. and why hospitals are probably the worst place to die. And so all this translates into a hygiene that science can talk about in very practical terms. It doesn't mean that religions were wrong. They were beautiful, but actually personality and miracle worship are childish, and what's needed is a deep understanding of the physics. And we believe in the self-empowering path here, and we believe that way we can eliminate personality and worship, miracle worship, such that it also eliminates religion wars because we produce agreement.
Yeah, and I think that thousands of years ago, especially in the East, they have a much better understanding of this. Not necessarily the equations of it, but they had the understanding of the concept much better than we do today.
And very detailed language about it. The ancient Vedas, for example. So there's lots of ways of talking about the physics, but it all does then boil down to a kind of electrical wave mechanics of a unified field. And we were going to begin by talking about understanding what life force is in practical terms. They say from Celestine prophecy, all human interaction is about charge. Whether it's kissing or choosing what broccoli to eat. And what that essentially means is that there's a certain charge field or capacitance that adds inertia to your aura. And if you grow that big enough, you take something through death. And if you don't, you don't. And so you can kind of define, your decision-making path through life is sort of a variation on the theme of follow your bliss to say, well, you make your decisions on whether it's going to grow your aura or not. And ultimately, that decision-making tree is not even selfish because the thinking a shareable thought, literally a pure intention, grows your aura because it helps your charge to implode. So there's some very good physics to learn here about how living charge is created and how it transfers. It's what ancients used to call the quality of grace, or the chi, orgone, baraka, shaktipat. We had too many names for this, but not enough understanding of the physics. In modern electrical language, this is called the phase conjugate dielectric, famous paper, Ellison, barium titanate land, about self-organizing fields. And this creates the ability to understand how it is that auras actually exchange hands. And it has to do with how plasma, which is the living charge field around your body, how it propagates, how it travels, and how it becomes self-aware. A practical example is that it's so well known and famous that ball lightning is very susceptible to telepathy.
I've heard that, yeah.
And our Budapest leader is very famous for that, George Edgley, about documented how you can talk to ball lightning, just the same way you can talk to tornadoes. But the physics of why is instructive. The center of ball lightning is basically a torus called phase conjugate. It's more available where plasma can propagate because the environment is more fractal or conjugate. Like, for example, you'll see these bubbles of charge where you have a lot of fresh cut down trees, but you'll never see these orbs, bubbles of charge, in a metal building with electrosmog in an ugly city. So what is called chi is actually an environment which is electrically fractal called phase conjugate. An example of that would be when Korotkov followed the Kogi to where they make phone calls to their ancestors and discovered you could measure the quality of air that allows phone calls to ancestors, called sacred space. And basically, in short, it's fractal air, or where charge distribution is efficient. And that's the syrupy electrical quality you feel in a stone circle that you do not feel in a metal building. It's charge distribution efficiency. And that's an introduction to sacred space and how you charge your aura.
Yeah, the stone building is much better. Maybe how about wood? Are there certain woods that... Better?
Exactly. In fact, our International Biological Architecture curriculum is the largest on the planet, taught in more countries, goldenmean.info/architecture. And you can see our 3 and 4 multiple international conferences in biological architecture. And the physics intro is quite simple. The reason you feel better in a building made of biologic materials, organic materials, is because the capacitance, called high dielectric constant, allows charge distribution to be efficient. A practical example, the Steiner biodynamic anthroposophic school always knows that children must only touch wood and natural stone and natural fabric. And the children must never ever touch metal or plastic or synthetics. And the reason for that is electrically instructive, because your aura cannot propagate efficiently through the synthetics because the dielectric constant is wrong, which means your aura cannot inhabit the space. Inhabit means literally to breathe or embed inside of. So you can't steer a tornado from inside a synthetic building. Sorry, it don't work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of something that I did about 10 years ago. I was sitting in a swimming pool and there was a cloud coming over and we were talking about something like this. And I just concentrated on the cloud. I told people this cloud will disappear in about 2 or 3 minutes. Well, it took about 5, but the cloud was gone. And I thought it was natural, but it blew the other people away.
Yes, well, and the physics of why that works is also instructive. It's well known that children who are happy and usually barefoot, hopefully barefoot in mud or water, are very good at putting a hole in a cloud. And the physics is that, of course, as Bill Tiller measured and proved, the most famous physicist, physics of consciousness, Bill Tiller's famous book, Conscious Acts of Creation, that focused human attention causes electric fields to compress. So physics is absolutely clear, that's measurable, and I'm the first one to explain why. Because focused human attention creates what's called a phase conjugate or fractal field, which is electrically implosive. So the child focused in the cloud creates a centripetal electrical capacitance, very much like a cloud seed, that provides an electrical path for the water vapor to share, called crystallize or precipitate. It has the same meaning in physics or magic. And so what causes the water vapor to form a droplet is the electrical symmetry that allows water vapor to touch permissive behavior. It's related very much so to the physics, what's now proven, that patriarchy causes formation of deserts and matriarchy does the opposite. We actually know why, because in cultures where touch is forbidden, magnetic lines become fractionated and not centripetal, so you create deserts, actually. It's a famous paper by James DeMayo, Desertification and Patriarchy. So it's very important to understand what is permission to touch for electrical symmetry, and that's what implosion fractal field geometry is about. A simple summary, here's a simple summary you can take home with you, is the first thing you need to do for geobiologic bliss hygiene, in terms of geobiology, would be make a magnetic map of your bed, your house, your garden, and your city. And start rearranging things so they all look like a rose, which is called fractal. For example, in Prague, where they do very well at attracting tourists and money, energy, and by the way, a great place for lucid dreaming and famous for alchemy, the original magnetic map for Prague is literally a rose. And this is instructive because it creates a centripetal force that is not just self-organizing and negentropic, but it's also charge distribution efficiency and literally life-defined. That is, life force is that centripetal field.
Yeah,
I know it sounds like sometimes I talk too fast. I admit I've done thousands of interviews. So
yeah, well, that's good then. You got it all in your head, but you can see what you talked about in countries where touch is forbidden. You see that in some of the countries southeast of you there.
Yeah. And so it isn't we want to criticize any one particular religion, but then this is what sort of got me started on the ET history of DNA, when I was even in university, which was, why was the origin of culture on the planet dominated by the fear of women? And I spent decades on that question. Where did the fear of women come from? Every religion starts with fear of women. And what I finally figured out is that began off planet. And that's what led me to start the ET origins of DNA. And actually our ancient Draco, Anunnaki, Nephilim founders, basically Enki and Enlil, they came from a culture in Orion, which was Pleiadian, which was matriarchy, and probably worse than our patriarchy. And and the fear of women actually is fear of permission to touch. So why? Well, here's a practical example. David Icke, for example, is mostly, unfortunately, critically injured when he was young because of too much football. It's a very British kind of phenomenon. And if you study what football is, called the poison pellet phenomena by Carl Jung, is the need to push out a poisonous pellet, literally a turd. And how did it get there? It's anger that arose because of lack of permission to touch. In fact, it's fundamental. This is Carl Jung 101. urge to touch frustrated becomes anger by definition. So all the young people in Britain, for example, where they pay their football stars way too much more than their teachers, and this is the tragedy.
Yeah.
It arises in Britain, of course, not the only country, but it arises because of failure to understand how to teach touch permissive behaviors fundamentally. So children who are brought up for coming of age in Samoa, very touch permissive culture, they have the opportunity, and you don't see this anger, which is basically testosterone poisoning. I'm trying to teach a certain lady friend here that testosterone is not a mistake that God made.
Hope not.
Basically what it is that the fear of touch and fear of women that dominates all religions and the foundation of most cultures on this planet, which came from off planet, creates a situation in which fear of touch results in permission to touch frustrated becomes anger, and therefore you have the young people that destroy themselves in these anger, the football kind of sports. Whereas if they had the opportunity to dance and art and music and things that are touch permissive, and then suddenly the creative juices are not frustrated and there's charge distribution. And ultimately, that's the physics behind why patriarchies cause the formation of deserts. It's proven.
Mm-hmm. I tell you, we're getting close to the break here, so let's hold that thought for about 2 minutes, and we'll be right back.
We're going to find a happily ever after.
Let's do.
Don't miss The Beacon with Jennifer Falah, the show that shines a light through the dark, educates, and empowers those searching for hope. Learn about the levels of heaven, how to positively create, and to meditate to build a stronger connection to the divine. Join Jennifer as she shares information acquired through communication with archangels, interdimensional meditation, and years of psychic experience and research. Tune in each Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for this empowering show, only on beaconoflightradio.com.
Tune in Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Pacific Time for The Soul's Edge, nourishing mind, body, and spirit. An hour twice a week dedicated to you. Host Jeanette Dames brings you information, guests, and angels to help you find the best way to nourish your mind, body, and spirit. Healthcare professionals, both traditional and Western, bring you information to keep you up and running. Authors from self-help to famous fiction chat about their inspiration and share it all with you. Local, national, and international speakers help you remember how to fill your spirit with love and peace. And on every show, Jeanette will help you get in touch with your angels. You are invited to call in during the show with your questions for Jeanette or her guests. Tune in every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, right here on Beacon of Light Radio. And visit Jeanette's Facebook page, The Soul's Edge, for updates and highlights of past and upcoming shows.
Hello. We are back, and we are talking to Dan Winter. And it's getting interesting here, so I hope you didn't lose your thought there, Dan. So let's just continue with that patriarchy. I can see the flaws in it, and maybe you can explain that just a little better.
Well, yeah, maybe I talked too fast. But,
No.
What we were trying to get at was that the urge to touch frustrated becoming anger is so fundamental to the problems in our schools, for example, that if we could teach touch permissive behaviors, then the creative juices of our young people could come out instead of these football and self-destructive behavior, which is pushing out the poison pellet, as Jung called it. Now, the reason that patriarchy, as James DeMayo's paper proved, causes the formation of deserts is illustrated perhaps by Professor Phil Callahan, who famously, traveling down in the Amazon jungles, needed to be able to predict whether the next tribe downriver was going to be headhunters or friendly. And he found he could measure that by checking in advance the magnetic permittivity of the soil. In other words, if the magnetic lines can be going through the soil efficiently, then by measurement, and by the way, it's a great predictor of fertility as well.
Really?
Yeah, it's famous. In fact, Professor Phil Callahan is a hero of Acres Magazine USA for that reason. We made films with him, great on insect navigation by pyramid-generated infrared and microwave. Lots of cool stuff there. But anyway, so what he showed was that not only could you predict in advance which villages were headhunters versus friendly by checking if the magnetic lines were making it through the soil, but the next thing, and this is matriarchy versus patriarchy again, the next thing he showed was that you could predict in advance where war versus peace was going to break out, whether the magnetic lines were making it through the soil. And he actually went to Israel, Ireland, and Yugoslavia and proved it. And we now know that actually not only do the magnetic lines break when war breaks out, but this causes the underground water to disappear. And literally, because, if you touch your lover and she doesn't like you, her skin will not turn pink. Means the blood doesn't vasodilate and come to the surface. Well, the Earth's blood is her water. And when there's anger on the surface, there goes the water.
Oh, yeah.
And so they sent women to Vukovar in Yugoslavia after the war, and they put in feathered labyrinths and did the geomancy, and sure enough, the underground water started to come back, which is to say they restored the symmetry of magnetic lines, geobiology, and they created the rose pattern again, and suddenly, you see, Village A and Village B are going to fight if the magnetic lines between them are disconnected. It's sort of DNA radio. Now, DNA radio has a deeper meaning here, and we might as well try to have that conversation a little bit while we're at it, otherwise known as mitogenic radiation. That The path down DNA, we know the helix is a ratcheting dodecapenta, all based on golden ratio in DNA. And that thread is braid, and embedded within a braid, resulting in a long wave embedded in the short, again based on golden ratio. And that creates implosion of charge in DNA called phase conjugation. In religious terms, it means getting a soul. In science fiction, it's called boson 7, or in Star Wars terms, it's the microchloridians in the blood. Mm-hmm. And that basically, you can visualize what it looks like is pine cones kissing noses, called phase conjugation. And that takes the transverse EMF down the spiral on the cone to make it longitudinal or compressional, improperly called scalar or torsional. And those longitudinal waves go faster than the speed of light and go through just about anything. And that's basically how DNA radio works. It's God's voice. It's the voice of ancestors. And when you embed in that, you can embed in that communications net. A practical example. When the Kozyrev Mir people, famously from Russia, set up these microwave coherent cylinders thousands of miles apart, you'd have to measure whether Earth magnetic line crossed there in nanotesla in advance. And if you did it right, you had military quality telepathy every time.
Really?
Yeah, and this is the physics of how you basically design and site burial grounds or labyrinths or cathedrals, for that matter. It's the physics of sacred site is the non-destructive implosive compression that embeds, like pine cones kissing noses, in the longitudinal EMF, the faster than light stuff that sort of goes around and gets around, and how ancestral voices work. That's why ancestral voices are available where the air is electrically fractal, as Korotkov measured, literally the physics of sacred space. And we now have 3 ways to measure that as electrical engineers at the top, goldenmean.info/architecture. Anyway, that conversation then leads to some instructions suggesting about the hygiene for bliss, which is the only way basically to get your aura immortal. And that leads to some stories about Kundalini, which we could go there if you wish.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So when I was in the Gurdjieff school, and let's make this personal, it's more colorful. So there I was, double Scorpio and a virgin, somewhere around the age of 21, pretty frustrated, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so started to do the Gurdjieff sacred gymnastic. And due to lots of karma and too many past lives, particularly as a monk, I started having intense Kundalini experiences, actually. And actually, I have to say that in my class, the Gurdjieff Sacred Gymnastic at the Gurdjieff School, Claymont.org, in George Washington's nephew's pig farm, actually, in Charlestown, West Virginia. In my class that summer, several ended up in the mental hospital, to be honest with you. And the women found they were all ovulating at double the speed of normal, actually. And it was intense, and many bliss experiences. Now, typically, when you have a Kundalini experience, the medical solution is to diagnose you as schizophrenic and put you away. The famous story is the three Christs of Ypsilanti, the famous book where they had three people who were hospitalized for believing they were Jesus, and they put them in one room and put on a microphone. But
I'd like to listen to that.
Yeah, it's a good book, Three Christs of Ypsilanti. So, what happened was that I had done graduate work in electrical engineering, and my family came to rescue me from the Gurdjieff school. They thought I had joined a cult. It was relatively colorful. And instead, I was adopted by Itzhak Ben Bentov, who wrote the book on the biomechanics of Kundalini in Boston, actually, is what happened to me. I was in his laboratory working with his capacitive accelerometer, where he measured Kundalini electrically. And I became, today, if I may say humbly, the world's leading teacher on the physics of Kundalini. I wouldn't call it a claim to fame, and that and 25 cents I can get coffee. But we do understand a lot of the science. And essentially what's happening, it's a climax bliss experience. It's a metabolic peak. It's metabolic acceleration. For one thing, we've learned how to create bliss and peak euphoric kinds of experience with metabolic acceleration in biofeedback, which you can see wireless for iOS at flameinmind.com. But the metabolic acceleration piece, the way Bentov measured it, and this is all in the biomechanics of Kundalini. The web article is goldenmean.info/Kundalini. And essentially, the capacitive accelerometer that he had in his lab measured the low frequencies of the spine liquid pump, the famous sacrocranial, and trained the ventricle liquids of the brain. And he actually published a chart of the ringing in the ears heard by meditators during bliss called Sangreal, Song in the Blood, or the Sound Current. And that chart is in my new book, Origin of Biologic Negentropy, at fractalfield.com. And you can see that the frequencies are actually a certain cascade called phase conjugate negentropic charge collapse, which is on the cover of my new book. And essentially, the long wave geometry in the spine liquid pump phase locks the short wave geometry of the ultrasonics in the ventricle liquid cavities, which crystallize the horns. This is called getting horny, in case you want to know. It's actually it's a restrained sexual juices gone upward. And the phonon geometry crystallizes, and it causes a compression wave focused on the pineal and triggers, and the top of your head becomes a red hot poker that you can't put out. And I had 30 years of this. I know a lot about it. And there's a lot of life force challenges. I'm not even saying it's useful for everyone. It's nice if it happens gently, and it's fatal if it happens too fast. But it's a metabolic climax. Later, Bob Dratch, famously, microwave emission scanning, measured Kundalini in the microwave. And actually what you do is you take the wavelength of adenosine diphosphate, ADP to ATP, the most important frequency in living cells, which I later proved that wavelength, 1.9 angstroms, is exactly my equation called the origin of biologic negentropy, integer exponents, golden ratio times Planck length and time. The Planck sphere, which is the wavelength and musical key signature of everything alive and negentropic and self-organizing, including the wavelengths of photosynthesis and brain waves and Schumann harmonics and the 3 radii of hydrogen and the Earth year, the Venus year, the galactic year, and precession. They all fit that equation. It's on the cover of my book. So that frequency signature allows implosive charge collapse and causes self-organization. So basically, you got this lightning rod going up your tailbone. A climax bliss experience. And as you say, you get a kind of a download. The trigger, the trick is, of course, is that this is a charge compression experience. It's collective plasma, crystallization, Christos, whatever you want to call it. And just like in the climax scene of the movie Powder, when he does lightning one more time, or Daniel Brinkley's 2 death experiences with lightning. Yeah. The physics is that only the shareable wave survives. What that means is, you know how when you put a crown on a king, we measured the capacitance, and it's implosive. It's called phase conjugate dielectric, and it's gold, and it's got the joules, and it accelerates metabolism. So what it does is increases the mentation rate of that king. Now, if that king is thinking shareable thoughts, he will better be able to embed his aura, and become the weather of the kingdom. Arthur and the land are one. However, if that king is angry, the thoughts will become even more disordered, and he will go insane faster. This is Shakespeare 101. Mm-hmm. So Kundalini is like that, but even stronger. So basically, the only way you can survive that kind of lightning psychologically is if you learn to focus on what's called pure principle or essence, or learn to recognize from every experience, every day, only that symmetry which serves all of DNA. A practical psychological example for bliss hygiene would be, when just before you go to bed, you play your day like it's a movie running backwards. If you keep interrupting, you haven't digested, which is to say, distilled from it the pure principle of the shareable wave that all of DNA can benefit from survival.
Oh. Yeah, we're getting down to the bottom of the hour here, so we need to take another 2-minute break for the information.
Sorry, I talked too fast.
No, that's okay. I think we can take the break now.
Are you plagued by nightmares, negative self-talk, depression, anxiety, or even strange occurrences in your home? You may need an energy cleanse healing or house cleanse to clear this from your life. Marcy Howell is a divine healer who can help you remove these negative energies from your body and space, as well as help you communicate with a loved one who has passed to find closure. If you are seeking a fresh start and outlook on life, contact Marcy Howell at divinehealings.co or find her on Facebook. Are you seeking a deeper connection with the divine? Do you wish you could receive guidance about your life or healing from a higher source? Jennifer Falah is an experienced angel intuitive, psychic medium, divine healer, published author, and radio show host who offers her services to the public. Move forward in a positive direction with answers from the angels and healing from the divine. Contact Jennifer for a reading today at psychicangelconnection.com or join her group on Facebook at Free Psychic Readings Beacon of Light.
Welcome to Spiritual Soup with Jules and Wendy, where we mix together a pinch of magic, a dash of love, 3 drips of belief, sprinkling some laughter, and we share it with you. Each week, Jules and Wendy will share their experiences and insights about all things spiritual, magical, and mystical. Jules is a best-selling author, an international clairvoyant, medium, and spiritual life coach. Wendy is an international psychic and holistic practitioner whose specialties include Reiki Master, Crystal Practitioner, and Spiritual Advisor. Together, they form the Spiritual Soup Team. Join us Thursday evenings at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern to experience the magic of Spiritual Soup, only on Beacon of Light.
Hello, and we're back with Dan Winters here. We are talking about the mysteries of the universe, and here you go, Dan.
Well, we are trying to understand the electrical nature of bliss process. There's some very important things to acknowledge here, even politically, that the ability to get your body charge radiant starts with becoming charge implosive. And if you become charge radiant, then your aura becomes plasma projective. And that's what enables you to lucid dream, which measures your ability to take something through death. So following your bliss is a relatively important thing. And the electrical knowledge of what bliss is fundamental to actually all kinds of sustainability. In fact, the definition of sustainability. So we were talking about the example of when you have this intense bliss experiences like Kundalini or some form of download experience, and you feel your thoughts go so rapidly, exactly like what happens at the moment of death, and why death is an electrical black hole. In fact, the sequence of visions that you see at the moment of death, called the Heinrich-Klüver form constants, the web article is goldenmean.info/immortality, actually measure the sequence of braid operations of DNA symmetrically. It's literally your aura knows it's implode or die, get fractal or get dead. And so you have to join a very high frequency charge distribution efficiency called the collective unconscious or ancestral memory. Now, we know a lot about the electrical nature of what that is, which it tells us how to design a burial ground and a good place to die, which is the opposite of a modern hospital, unfortunately, because only charge distribution efficiency is how you enter that fractal field. So we were using the example, when you had this intense bliss, if every thought is about pure principle, then suddenly you can get to the center of spin with your focus, and your attention doesn't depart from the center of the tornado that you're steering. And so learning to recognize pure principle is learning to get to the center of the spin of all DNA, and that's how the collective unconscious works. Basically, DNA has been collectivizing its library for 1 billion years, and what it's collectivizing at its spin core, which is called phase conjugate, is the library of every survival memory that serves collective survival. This is called pure intention. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that it's actually measurable in the EKG. I'm famous for the origin of measurement of heart coherence. We have a new article on that, hrv-app.com, which is our 3 new biofeedback apps, hrv-app.com/real heart coherence. And you can see how we discovered the original measurement of heart coherence. It's so cool because you're measuring the internal phase coherence, the internal ICC, internal cardiac coherence, the EKG, with a second order power spectrum, which is my discovery of how to measure heart coherence, which is why I'm credited in the literature for inventing the term heart coherence. Mm-hmm. When you're measuring it, this peak going up and down, and it's a lie detector. I mean, if he says, "Will you marry me?" and it's going up, then he's telling the truth. But if he says, "Will you marry me?" and it's going down, then he's telling a lie. It's that simple. It actually works because the heart is the same. It's internal phase coherence. The climax form of coherence is conjugate. So the collective mind is actually able to focus only where waves become shareable, which is why a perfectly shareable wave measures pure intention, which is what fractal and phase conjugation is. So you can see where that conversation goes. It's very fun.
Yeah. What can we do to enhance these capabilities? Maybe through biofeedback, or what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's lots. Actually, my second book is called Implosion: Secret Science of Ecstasy and Immortality. And the complete color PDF is at goldenmean.info/consciouskids. And basically, we talk about the hygiene in some detail. It's a hygiene of attracting charge, very simply. For example, diet, eat live food, avoid processed food. And you recognize that everything you eat, you need to digest its memory. So if the animal was afraid at the moment of death, that's the mucus you will have, et cetera, et cetera. So eventually you learn to eat mostly live food and fruit and things that cause your aura to grow. And then there's the kinesthetic aspect, which is basically some form of yoga or gymnastic to allow you to bring discipline to the center of gravity of your aura. And the third area is the psychological aspects that you learn to deal with all your past pain. I mean, in the first years of my Kundalini, I used to cry for months at a time, actually. And I realized later that what I was doing is dealing with all that pain that you have to, because ultimately it's a matter of seeing the pure principle behind every wave, and everything that was not shareable, it has to go. And that's what the crying was about. So you have to deal with your pain, basically. And
what can we do?
The fourth area that's interesting is that when Jasbiheen teaches people how to live without food, to live on air, and we have friends in Italy, for example, at Torino, that are very successful. One of the things that's so critical to being able to live on air, you have to learn to live in nature. So you have area where you have lots of charge available. You have to avoid mostly cities and metal buildings and electrosmog and dead air, because this is going to kill your aura. It's fatal to survival. And then the other thing was, so you're walking barefoot in nature and doing all things to give you access to charge. I recommend the book on grounding called Earthing, for example. But the other thing was that you need to believe what you're doing is your highest level of service. And if you don't believe that about your own day, then you don't absorb charge.
Yeah.
It's sort of the urge to death occurs when you don't believe you're serving. So, but basically what you need to do, one of the things you need to do in order to observe lots of charges, imagine yourself, let's see, what could my highest level of service be? And for at least an hour or two every day, that's what you need to be doing. And then you'll be imploding better.
That's a pearl. That's a pearl right there. When you're talking about living on air, are you talking also sun gazing? Because I've just started that again.
The sun is the most phase conjugate system in our environment, and we only graduate from the solar system if we can take our aura through the heart of the sun. It's not escapist. It's called growing up from kindergarten. So very good to be aware that the sun is the electrical heart of the place. In fact, the electrical heart of the sun has been seen by clairvoyance, the Anu 7 spins, 5 spins, which is the symmetry of the human heart muscle and the heart of hydrogen as well. It's very important physics. So, in fact, these shamans who see through the heart of the sun, called the Solar Heart Community at yahoogroups.com, I co-founded. The experience was to actually see through the center of the sun as if it were an eyeball. And the starting with sun gazing is very appropriate, but it needs to be done very carefully, obviously. But particularly if the air is high quality, and sunrise or sunset is the best time, of course.
Yes.
Let me explain why. The example is Agnihotra. The reason Agnihotra works, you have the flame, you have clarified butter, then you have a gold or copper pyramid capacitor, and then it's aligned with an underground pyramid, and then you do that precisely at sunrise and sunset. And the orthogonality, the right angle of sunrise sunset to the incident plasma is called phase conjugation. And we saw the farms where they were doing Agnihotra regularly in Poland were like the Garden of Eden compared to the desert around them. And it's simple. The fertility was generated by this implosive plasma. And the climax version of the implosive plasma, another example, is our very successful plasma rejuvenation system. I took the equation on the cover of my book and applied it to plasma, and discovered it was the principle behind Priory, famously here in France, for healing thousands and thousands of cancers documented by the French government. And so we discovered the principle behind the Priory device, and it is now therapy.net. Thera, Thera, like therapy by phi, P-H-I, therapy, T-H-E-R-A, Therapy, P-H-I, .net, therapy.net, which is very successful rejuvenation plasma in 13 countries. We can deal with short-term pain very quickly, and even long-term chronic pain. In most cases, it's amazing. We don't make medical claims, but you can see from the reports all over the world that we're quite successful, and we're looking at formal medical trials and lots of things. So we have discovered what makes plasma implosive, and it creates life force. So, we understand a lot about life force systems. And this is all described in the science section at bioactivefield.com and some of our advanced technologies at implosiongroup.com.
Well, that could probably explain some of the reason why Hiram Ratan was able to observe by a NASA team. He did not eat for 400 days. Just sun gazing.
Well, that's good. Basically, the point is that the charge is the food. So another example where the yogis famously can go underground for many days at a time and appear not to need to breathe. My own experience, I can tell you, I know exactly what that is. At the peak experience of Kundalini, you stop breathing for many, many minutes, and I've done that, and it can be life-threatening. It's highly implosive and blissful. Yeah. But the reason you stop breathing is electrically instructive. Consciousness inhabits, inhabit means to be the breath of centripetal force. The H is the 5. Okay. And so consciousness inhabits the phase conjugate point. Now, normally, the phase conjugate point between the brain hemispheres at the center where the two pine cones kiss noses is you have, during bliss, the right and left hemisphere make golden ratio between the alpha and beta frequencies. I documented that with my bliss tuner, which is now flameinmind.com. But further, we know more about what consciousness inhabits. That when Ingo Swann lit a flame with his mind thermistor at a distance, he did it through a Faraday cage. And we now know the physics which is you can only be a shaman as a Cherokee or a Bon Po if you can do that, light a flame with your mind. And we know the physics very well. The right and left hemisphere now they have to be golden ratio called phase conjugate, but they need to be 180 degrees out of phase so the pine cones kiss noses. So you inhabit that conjugate point, which you can measure and teach in brainwave biofeedback, and that's what flameinmind.com is, wireless biofeedback brainwave for iPhone. So that embeds you in a longitudinal wave, and when the longitudinal waves cross at a distance, you can do non-destructive remote plasma containment, the holy grail of plasma fusion physics. Very cool stuff. Lots on that at implosionsgroup.com. That's what the flame in the mind is. So the ability to get that focused requires this centripetal force, and to teach that with biofeedback is what we're doing at iThrive.com, which is our HRV3 heart rate variability breath biofeedback systems. For example, the Therify plasma system has the same low frequencies as the spine liquid pump and the brainwave series and the Schumann harmonics, etc. That's what it's based on. And it measurably entrains what's called 0 point in the sacrocranial famous spine liquid pump, famous for being the healing turning point, the healing crisis moment is when the spine liquid pump stops, because that's when it emerges more phase coherent. So we can measure that 0 point in the spine liquid pump induced by the plasma of Therify.net with the HRV breath biofeedback, real heart coherence at iThrive.com, ITHRVE.com, or HRV-app.com, or craniosacral-app.com. You can find any of those websites. Tell the story of our 3 new biofeedback apps to make this teachable. So it's basically the bliss wave mechanics of the spine liquid pump, which relates very much to the Kundalini conversation.
Yeah, we're getting up on the 45 minutes here, so let's take a 2-minute break, and then we'll be back with Dan Winter again.
Welcome to Beacon of Light Radio, a guiding light in the storm of life. Do you want to connect with inspirational spiritual guests? Have fun while quenching your thirst for metaphysical teachings. Then set a reminder for Kimline Company with host Kimla Dodds, international best-selling author, psychic medium, astrologer, and feng shui practitioner, every Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Come be a part of the show by joining us in the chat room or calling in for support or a free reading. We are waiting for your light on Kimline Company. Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Beacon of Light Radio. And until then, may the angels protect you and guide you.
You're up for a treat, embarking on a journey of love and abundance. Tune in to Universal Treats with intuitive coach and healer Thomas Johansson. Open your mind and heart to reconnect with your divine self and natural birthright. Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and 8 p.m. Scandinavian Time. Only on Beacon of Light Radio.
Divine Enlightenment with Susan Gratz is a show that offers inspiration, guidance, empowering messages, and insight on creating a better life path for you by using divine intervention. With years of experience from her own personal life experiences, combined with the divine guidance, knowledge, and research, she will help guide you on your own life path. Tune in on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on Beacon of Light Radio.
Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and so does psychic medium Bob Brown. England's renowned paranormal investigator will explore the world of the unknown with special guests that will thrill and expand your mind. Tune in to Over the Rainbow with host Bob Brown every Wednesday and Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and 8 p.m. in the UK, right here on Beacon of Light Radio.
Hello, and we are back with Dan Winter. And Dan, when you finish your thought on that, I like you maybe go a little more into what you are doing to stay healthy, maybe because of raw food and all the other, and also mention something about your inventions that could help us reach some of those capabilities.
Well, thank you. The inventions are of course, theimploder.com, which is water implosion for agriculture and health. Basically, imploded water creates spin for health. It's beautiful, and plant growth is quite dramatic. And the other invention is Therify.net, the plasma system we have in 13 countries. Advanced rejuvenation plasma, get younger, restore eyesight, eliminate pain. It's amazing and creates bliss experiences for many people. And we have a whole bunch of energy technologies, implosiongroup.com. And the short lesson about the energy technologies is actually relevant here. You see, we've been talking about bliss process. And bliss happens basically when the body implodes electrically. And so people think, how come we don't have free energy? Is there some giant conspiracy preventing us from having free energy? But actually, free energy is a bit of a misnomer, because there are electrical circuits which can do something like what biology does to implode and attract charge. Tesla's charge shuttle oscillator is an example. The Bedini charger is another. The Beard and Meg. There's many examples. Phase conjugate coatings, cache. There's lots of examples of implosive electric circuits. And the point is that free energy is the wrong term, because basically what they do is they absorb the centripetal force, which is essentially what gravity is. And as Tesla learned somewhat the hard way, and as Atlantis learned the hard way, if you implode the charge of gravity, you can destabilize the Earth grid, actually.
Yeah.
So that energy is not actually free energy. It comes from the plenum of the vacuum, and there is a price to pay. And that price to pay basically is you must serve in return, or the Earth doesn't want to give you her blood. So people might want to stop talking about free energy and instead understand how that you can make electrical circuits fractal enough to implode, and recursive, ideally phase conjugate. And it actually starts with a study of the electrical nature of human bliss itself. And that's why those two conversations are related. You can see more on that at implosiongroup.com and fractalfield.com.
Yeah.
But we have major technology groups that are doing a lot of those projects, including Tesla turbines for pumping and various new desalination projects, energy projects. We have a lot happening in the zero-point energy field. But your question was...
What are you doing? Are you vegetarian?
Thank you. Have I changed the subject yet?
No, we're working on it.
No, well, I learned at a fairly young age, even in college, that it was critical to have discipline about food. And I actually learned that lesson in personal studies living with Michio Kushi's macrobiotics school in Boston. I lived in Boston with a Gurdjieff community there and studied at MIT a bit. And also the sponsor of a lot of my early world tours, Roger Green, was the original founder of macrobiotics for Australia and UK, et cetera. So we have a lot of experience. And that discipline essentially means that you need to be aware of what causes mucus. And, for example, most bread and dairy products cause mucus. And ultimately, the reason it causes mucus is because your body's immune system goes self, not self. And to keep the not self from eating the self, you use mucus. So if something you eat causes lots of mucus, you know that there's a not self problem. Yeah. And that's the beginning of learning how to have discipline about it. So in translation, what that means now, for example, most days for breakfast, I had this morning, and most every morning I have fresh papaya, blueberries, lime, pecans, walnuts ground, and pears. Oh. And it's wonderful. And then I drink only herbal tea and spring water with lemon almost any time. And for lunch, I have sauteed fresh veggies, and sometimes a very well-prepared seafood if I get the right stuff. And usually most every day I will have a soup made of green peas and green lentils, and almost no bread. Sometimes I have chestnut crackers. And yeah, that's pretty much my life. I have a little bit of a dark chocolate addiction, but I can keep that under control sometimes.
Well, that sounds delicious. And I did not hear anything about steaks or going to McDonald's or anything like that in there. So I think you're doing it right.
Yeah, my lady friend is vegetarian, and I eat a little bit of seafood, but I'm largely vegetarian as well. But it isn't. The thing is, you need a source of high quality protein if you're going to have intense bliss, and that's tricky because you have to pay the karmic debt of where that protein came from. So eating animals, there's some karma. Aboriginals knew there's some karma there, mucus karma.
Yeah, that comes. And excuse me. Your biofeedback equipment, is that something that we can get our hands on to start working with?
Well, I invented the heart coherence concept, and then invented the heart tuner and the bliss tuner, which cost thousands of dollars. And now we're replacing those with the the iOS applications at Apple's App Store. The 3 apps there now are at iThrive.com. That's ITHRVE.com. HRV, heart rate variability. So ITHRVE.com. Or you can see it at HRV-app.com. Same thing. So the one app measures the chakras, the sequence in which the chakras are triggered by a sequence of disciplined breathing. And the other is a stress solution. It really walks circles around the HeartMath Institute, which has a serious mistake in how they define coherence. And you can read about the HeartMath mistake at hrv-app.com/real heart coherence. And so the 3 apps are there now for heart rate variability and breath training. Also, we can do empathy training even with the original app at heartsring.com. And soon we will integrate with that brainwave coherence with heart-breath coherence with the flameinmind.com app, which will fit with the other app, and the Tomatis voice harmonics. So we'll have a complete whole-body coherence biofeedback system available soon, and 3 apps are there already.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. I do have one question that I was hoping I wouldn't forget, and I didn't. My co-host here, her name is Diana Seraphim. That last name, Seraphim, means something. And I know that names, they have a vibration attached to it. And once we understand more about that vibration or what maybe the name would mean, it could have a profound effect on us. Could you speak a little bit to this?
Diana Dios, the divine branching, the divine Anu, sun god, the divine branching of the feminine of the sun god, Dian. Seraphim, Sera means serrate or cut by phi, as in the seraphic font. Seraphi, cut by phi, is the plasma angelics. You have the seraphim and the ophanim. The seraphim are the high ancestors of our Anunnaki dragon root, the high dragons, which were like archons, as opposed to the Ophanics, which are called the bird tribes or the whirling ones. So, for example, Gabriel, whose genetic intent became the Mormons, the Muslims, and the Christians, was a seraphim.
Ah, that's the origin of the name then.
Yeah, basically, angelics are interstellar plasma beings, as the physicists at plasmauniverse.com know. And if we don't communicate with them, they regard us as drunk and stupid correctly because we cannot survive. For example, we are going to have tornadoes and storms that destroy us if we do not learn to steer them. And that's what large plasma beings do. So if we fail to communicate with the large plasma elementals, the gnomes and undines, and on a larger scale, the angelic forces, it is appropriate that we would be destroyed, actually. So we must, as John D. well knew. And those are the next courses at fractalu.com, starting 1 week from today, actually, on Sunday. And basically, the practical example is when Shakespeare was in John D. and Kelly's lab in Prague called Francis Garland in John D.'s famous notebook. At the time when Shakespeare designed the storm which took out the Spanish Armada, Shakespeare later called the Tempest. How he did that is Plasma Physics 101, and it's essential. It starts with learning how to steer tornadoes, and it's essential to the survival of our species.
Wow. The people in Kansas should know about this.
Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
You know what's over the rainbow? Remember, the two frequencies, the only two frequencies that motorized photosynthesis are precisely phase conjugate. So actually the cause of the existence of color is phase conjugation. So now we know the physics why rainbows occur when great Tibetan saints die. We understand the physics quite well. They add a centripetal electric force to their environment.
That's interesting.
Was that happily ever after?
Yeah, I suppose, huh?
Almost.
Wow.
Somewhere over the rainbow.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
we saw
we're coming up to the end of the show here. Could you give us your last good message for the people listening? There's got to be another pearl in there somewhere.
Well, I mean, the real message is the physics of consciousness is a way to understand spirituality in a beautiful, self-empowering way. And it does boil down to learning the hygiene discipline to grow your aura, literally follow your bliss. And that involves the diet, the yoga, the discipline of thought, and the environment. We didn't talk a lot about the environment, but it means that you need to live in an environment with live air and walks in nature so that your aura can grow. And when your aura gets coherent, you'll find yourself lucid dreaming and having bliss experiences. And that predicts ability to take memory through death. That's Introduction 101 to the science and hygiene of the bliss for spirituality. And it's basic and it's essential. And it transcends religion wars and replaces it with an empowering science of spirit. And that's what we're about. Fractalfield.com. Thank you very much.
Sounds wonderful. And I thank you very much, Dan, for being our guest. This was very enlightening. And do you know what's going to happen sometime between now and the next 6 months? I'm going to ask you to come back.
Well, together we're going to become a shareable wave, and that's a good thing. It's very fractal.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will be here next week with the Universal Consciousness Show. And until then, stay safe.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.